I didn't think she'd actually do it. Not in front of all those people. Not with the spotlight on me. Not in the one moment I had waited my entire career for. But she did. She walked straight up to the stage heels clicking like a countdown, and before I could finish my sentence, she yanked the mic right out of my hands. I remember the sound of feedback, the collective gasp from the audience, and the way my heart cracked clean down the middle as she turned to the crowd and said, "This entire pitch is stolen. She took my idea. She's a fraud." Silence. Then murmurs. Then eyes. Hundreds of them turning, judging, whispering. And me? I just stood there, frozen. My laptop was still projecting my slide onto the screen behind her, my hands still trembling from the adrenaline of trying to secure my first major investment. And Lindsay, me sister, my own sister, was out there tearing it all down. What made it worse wasn't the accusation. It was that she knew what this pitch meant to me. That I had spent 2 years building that app from scratch. That I had skipped birthdays, missed holidays, pulled all-nighters while she flitted from one failed influencer business to another, never building anything real. She knew the stakes. And yet she smiled. A rehearsed, influencer smile, like she was posing for the camera, like she was the victim. I was escorted off stage. They paused the pitch competition. And as I walked out, I saw Marcus, Lindsay's ex-boyfriend, now one of the panel, judge, lower his gaze and rub his temple like he couldn't believe what just happened. Neither could I. But that moment, that public humiliation, wasn't the end. It was the spark. Because 9 months later, I stood on a different stage, under brighter lights, next to Marcus, with a signed $20 million contract in my hand. And guess who was sitting in the front row, being forced to watch? Let's rewind. Let me tell you how I turned betrayal into the best damn thing that ever happened to me. My name is Valerie Carter. I've never been the kind of person who walks into a room and instantly draws attention. I don't sparkle. I don't pose. I don't speak in perfectly rehearsed sound bites. I'm the kind of person who shows up 5 minutes early, quietly gets the job done, and lets my work speak for itself, which, in a family like mine, means I've always been invisible. My sister, Lindsay, she was the showstopper. The spotlight didn't just find her, it followed her. Always. From the moment she won her first beauty pageant at 9 to her viral promposal video in high school, Lindsay has always known how to perform. She's loud when she cries, louder when she laughs, and somehow always the center of every conversation, even when she's not in the room. Growing up, it wasn't jealousy I felt. Not at first. It was more like confusion. I couldn't understand why people clapped louder for her than for me, even when I was the one winning the math competitions, building robots, getting internships. Lindsay didn't care about grades. She cared about attention. And she always got it. After high school, we went in completely different directions. She moved to LA to become an influencer, and I stayed in Seattle to study computer science. She posted rise and grind quotes and selfies in borrowed designer clothes. I built prototypes and stayed up learning to code, fueled by vending machine coffee and ambition I never said out loud. We weren't close. Not really. But we kept in touch: holidays, birthdays, the occasional text when something big happened. I knew she didn't respect what I did. She called my job nerd stuff, joked that I was building apps no one cares about. But I let it slide, because that's what I always did. I let her talk. I let her take up space. I let her be Lindsay, until she crossed the line. What I was building wasn't just some app. It was personal. It was designed for young adults especially, women to learn how to manage their finances without shame or judgment. I'd watched too many friends drown in credit card debt because no one taught them how money works. I wanted to change that. I called it Thrive Nest. Simple, empowering, built with real people in mind. I'd been working on it quietly for 2 years, bootstrapping every dollar, testing it with focus groups, improving it bit by bit. And then came the opportunity. A pitch competition in Seattle with real investors, including Marcus Granta, former tech founder turned VC who happened to be Lindsay's ex. I didn't think that would matter. I didn't even tell her I was applying. But she found out. And the moment she realized I'd be presenting to a room that included someone from her past, something inside her snapped. And that's when everything I thought I knew about my sister about what she was capable of changed. But I'll get to that. Because before she destroyed everything, I still believed we could coexist. I still believed we were just different people taking different paths. I didn't realize she wasn't just chasing attention. She was chasing control. And what she couldn't control, she had a habit of ruining. The day of the pitch was a blur of nerves and caffeine. I arrived early, just like I always do. I had practiced this presentation 100 times out loud, in front of a mirror, with a timer, even once in the shower. My slides were clean. My numbers were solid. My messaging? Polished but authentic. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just hoping to be taken seriously, I knew I deserved it. The event was held in a modern co-working space downtown, with string lights, folding chairs, and a stage backed by a giant LED screen. It was small enough to feel personal, but big enough to be intimidating. 5 judges, 50 investors in the crowd, and me. The organizer handed me a microphone and smiled. "You're up next." As I stepped onto the stage, my heart pounded, but not from fear. From purpose. From something close to pride. I was about to introduce ThriveNest to the world, and no one was going to take that moment from me. At least, that's what I thought. I got through the first few minutes smoothly. Introduced the problem, told the story, made the audience nod. Then I clicked the remote to reveal our growth projections when I saw movement from the back of the room. And then, I heard the heels. 4 sharp clicks. Then silence. My stomach turned. It was Lindsay. She didn't belong there. I never invited her. I never even told her about the event. But there she was, striding down the aisle like she owned the place, wearing a blazer that didn't quite hide her fury. I tried to keep going. But then before I could react, she climbed onto the stage, walked straight toward me, and grabbed the microphone from my hands like we were in some twisted family skit. And then she said it. Out loud. In front of everyone. "She's lying. This app? It's not hers. She stole the idea from me. From my old content. She's using my words. She's using my brand. This whole thing is fake." Gasps. Audible gasps. Somewhere in the audience, a chair scraped back. One of the judges, Marcus, stiffened in his seat, eyes narrowing. And me? I stood there, staring at my sister, feeling like I'd been stripped naked in front of everyone I wanted to impress. "She's just jealous," Lindsay continued, voice trembling but loud. "I posted about financial wellness years ago. I started this conversation. She just dressed it up with code and called it her own." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. No one moved to stop her. Not yet. The event host finally rushed up, gently placing a hand on Lindsay's arm and whispering something I couldn't hear. She let go of the mic sensually and walked off the stage like a martyr. The moderator turned to me and asked if I wanted to continue. But the room had shifted. The warmth was gone. The confidence evaporated. All I could say was, "No, thank you. WW," and I walked off the stage. My slides stayed behind on the screen, numbers, mission, solution tainted by doubt. As I walked out into the hallway, my ears still ringing, I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just sat on the cold bench outside the venue, staring at my hands. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the invisible sister. I felt like the enemy. I didn't go home right after the pitch. I couldn't. Instead, I drove to the waterfront, parked by the pier, and just sat there watching boats drift in and out of view like they had all the time in the world. I stared at my reflection in the windshield and tried to convince myself it hadn't happened. That maybe I had imagined it. That my sister hadn't just humiliated me in front of dozens of investors and mentors I had spent years trying to reach. But no amount of silence could change what was already echoing across social media. By the time I checked my phone, someone had posted a blurry clip of the moment Lindsay snatching the mic, my stunned face, the chaos. The caption read, "Influencer calls out sister for stealing her brand." Savage AF. Hundreds of comments, thousands of views, and none of them knew the truth. When I finally gathered enough strength to leave, I did what I always did when I was overwhelmed. I went to my parents' house. The porch light was on. My mother opened the door with that same familiar smile that had greeted me since I was a child, but when she saw my face-eyed, silent, she didn't ask what happened. She just stepped aside and said, "She told us you'd come." She, Lindsay. Of course she had gotten there first. Of course she had told her version first. Dad was in the kitchen, sipping tea like nothing had just imploded. I sat down on the couch, waited for someone to say something. Anything. But all I got was this: "You should have let her explain on her terms." My mom said quietly, almost like a scolding. I should have? I blinked. She hijacked my pitch. She made me look like a thief. She felt you were taking something that belonged to her. Dad chimed in. That idea, she says you two talked about it once, years ago. Talked about it? My voice cracked. I've been working on this app for 2 years. Lindsay posted a motivational quote once, and suddenly she's a fintech pioneer? No one responded. It hit me harder than I expected, the silence. The way no one jumped to defend me. No one said, "We know you, Val." No one said, "That wasn't right." They just looked uncomfortable. Like I had made dinner awkward. And then Mom said it. The line that still stings when I think about it. "Valerie, you know Lindsay. She's emotional. She doesn't handle being left out very well." This. She wasn't left out, I said, barely containing the shaking in my hands. She was never in. This wasn't hers. It was never hers. But maybe, Dad said slowly, you could have been more sensitive. Maybe you could have let her in somehow. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the pain didn't know where else to go. They didn't see me. Not really. They saw the quiet daughter, the one who never made a scene, who didn't cry at the dinner table, who always picked up her own pieces. And they assumed that meant I'd be fine, that I didn't need defending. But I did. That night, I left without saying goodbye. And for the first time in my life, I stopped calling that house home. It was 3 days later when I got the message. I had silenced most of my notifications by then, muted group chats, archived family texts, even uninstalled Instagram just to breathe. But somehow, that email still found its way through the noise. Simple subject line. About the pitch. And it was from Marcus Grant. My heart stopped for a beat. I hadn't spoken to Marcus directly, ever. I knew who he was. Of course his name carried weight in the startup world. A former founder who'd exited big and was now a strategic partner at one of the more progressive VC firms in Seattle. I also knew, vaguely, that he and Lindsay had dated briefly 2 years ago. It ended badly. Lindsay had called him controlling, distant, emotionally unavailable. But then again, she said that about almost every man who walked away from her. I clicked the message. Valerie. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about what happened at the pitch. That wasn't okay. And for what it's worth, I know the work is yours. I remember your submission from the screening process. I read it twice. It stood out. If you're open to a conversation, no pressure. Just don't let this stop you. Your idea matters. You matter. Bore. Marcus. I stared at those words longer than I should have. I didn't know what to feel. Gratitude? Caution? Relief? I read the email again. He remembered my submission. He read it twice. After 3 days of silence from my family, friends tiptoeing around me like I was radioactive, and a public pitch disaster that felt like a full-body bruise, here was someone with actual power saying I wasn't invisible. I replied before I could overthink it. Thank you. I really needed to hear that. I'd be open to a conversation. Just not sure where to start. He wrote back minutes later. Let's start with this. How can I help you build it? No small talk. No ego. Just that one sentence. I didn't cry, but I wanted to. The next day, we met at a quiet coffee shop tucked into a corner of Capitol Hill. Marcus showed up in a hoodie and jeans, no entourage, no airs, just a notepad in one hand and a sincere look in his eyes. He listened, really listened, as I explained Thrive Nest. The data model, the interface goals, the community aspect I was trying to create for young women like me. And when I finished, he leaned back, folded his arms, and said, "It's good. Like, really good. You've clearly done the work. What happened to you was garbage. But that doesn't mean this ends here. Let's talk about next steps." That was the moment it shifted. Not just the project. Me. Because Marcus wasn't offering charity. He wasn't giving me some pity meeting out of guilt or drama with my sister. He saw the value. He saw me. He offered resources, mentorship, a development grant to get the beta version off the ground, and most importantly, a partnership that didn't ask me to shrink. Before we left, he said something I've never forgotten. You can't stop people from trying to dim your light, but you can choose to build something so bright, it blinds them. And that day, I chose to build. Comebacks don't start with fireworks. They begin in silence, in small rooms, over lukewarm coffee, with scribbles on legal pads and tired eyes that still refuse to give up. That's how mine began with Marcus, 2 laptops, and the quiet belief that just because the world laughed once didn't mean it would always laugh. We agreed on one thing from the start: this wouldn't be about revenge. Not entirely. It would be about reclaiming the story, my story, and building something real from the wreckage. If it stung for Lindsay to watch that happen, so be it. But Thrive Nest wasn't born out of spite. It was born out of need. And now, it had to grow in secret. We moved fast, but intentionally. Marcus introduced me to a UI designer who used to work at a top wellness app. We spent weeks reworking the brand. We kept the soul of Thrive Nest accessible, educational, female, first, but stripped away anything that could be traced back to old screenshots or family drama. The color palette changed. The name stayed. I liked that. It felt like I stayed, too. By week 4, we had a prototype. By week 8, a beta test. We recruited users anonymously: college students, young professionals, single moms balancing bills and side hustles. I read every piece of feedback like it was a letter to my past self. I didn't know I was allowed to ask these questions about money. No one's ever talked to me like I could actually understand this. I feel less ashamed. Those weren't metrics. Those were milestones. Meanwhile, Marcus worked behind the scenes. He reached out to partners, built the investor deck, mapped a funding strategy that didn't depend on the big dramatic pitch stage anymore. We wouldn't beg for validation. We would prove it quietly, relentlessly. And Lindsay? She had no idea. We scrubbed all public association between us. I unfollowed her, removed our tagged photos, erased the digital breadcrumb trail. She was too busy managing her own drama online anyway, defending her actions, spinning stories, trying to salvage whatever brand she thought she had. And I was done watching her. All my focus went into the work. There were nights I forgot to eat. Days I worked through storms and headaches and moments of doubt that whispered, what if she was right? What if no one takes you seriously now? But then Marcus would check in with a simple, "You good?" Or one of his favorite one-liners, "We're not building hype, we're building legacy." That grounded me. It reminded me that this wasn't a sprint. This was the slow, deliberate reclamation of everything I let her take from me: confidence, space, voice. And as the product took shape, so did I. I found my rhythm again. My voice. Not the polished, crowd-pleasing kind, but the one that speaks clearly in quiet rooms. The one that doesn't flinch when someone doubts. The one that knows the work is real even if no one claps yet. Because the real comeback? It doesn't need applause to begin. It just needs one person who sees your worth and the courage to believe them. And for the first time in a long time, I did. 9 months. That's how long it had been since my sister tried to ruin me. 9 months since the mic snatching, the accusations, the humiliation in front of people who held the keys to my dream. 9 months since I walked off a stage thinking my voice didn't matter. And now I was back. Different stage. Different city. Different version of me. This time, the lights felt warmer. Not because I was less nervous, but because I was no longer looking for permission to stand there. I had earned it. Quietly. Brick by brick. The conference was in San Francisco's sleek, polished, full of buzzwords and capital. The kind of place where reputations were made or shredded in real time. It was invitation only. Marcus got us in. But this time, I wasn't a hopeful finalist. I was the headliner. We weren't there to pitch. We were there to announce. I stood backstage, wearing a navy jumpsuit that made me feel like a CEO even if I still sometimes felt like that scared girl from Seattle. Marcus stood next to me, casually scrolling through his notes, calm as ever. "You ready?" he asked. I took a breath. "I don't know." He smiled. "That's okay, the work is ready." And it was. The MC stepped up to the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Marcus Grant and Valerie Carter, co-founders of ThriveNest." Applause. Spotlight. We walked out side by side. And in the second row, almost like fate had arranged it, sat Lindsay. Full glam. Designer blazer. That forced half smile she always used when she knew she wasn't in control. She wasn't expecting this. No one had leaked it. We had built in silence, and now we were launching in surround sound. Marcus spoke first, laid the groundwork, introduced the market, the mission. Then he handed it off to me. I took the mic. I paused not because I was nervous, but because I wanted to feel the weight of the moment. All those nights crying in my car, all the moments I doubted if I could recover, they led here. I told our story. Not the family drama, not the viral scandal, but the real story, the users we were helping, the lives we were changing, the dignity we were restoring to conversations around money. I watched faces shift in the crowd. Some leaned forward, some nodded. Then came the closing slide. Today, we're proud to announce a $20 million Series A investment led by Grant & Co. to bring ThriveNest to every college campus in the Pacific Northwest and beyond. Silence. Then applause. Lindsay's face dropped. For once, she wasn't the center of anything. I looked at her briefly, not long enough to give her power, just long enough to let her know. "I saw you." And I rose anyway. After we walked off stage, Marcus leaned toward me and whispered, "You just rewrote the story." I smiled. I just finally got to tell the truth. I don't know what she expected. Maybe she thought I would freeze up again. Maybe she thought I'd fumble, or that Marcus would do all the talking, and I'd just stand there like a sidekick to my own project. Maybe she thought she'd already won. But when I stepped off that stage calm, confident, applauded, and the deal was signed, sealed, and publicly celebrated, it became clear to everyone in that room, including Lindsay, the narrative had changed, and she wasn't in it anymore. At first, she kept her cool. She clapped politely, nodded when others did, even forced a smile when someone leaned over to whisper something to her, probably asking, "Isn't that your sister?" But I saw the cracks forming. They started small, her eyes twitching at the corners, fingers tightening around the edge of her seat, jaw clenching with every round of applause. The cameras weren't on her this time. The questions weren't coming her way. And the man sitting next to me, her ex, Marcus, wasn't even looking in her direction. He was looking at me. With pride. That was the moment she snapped. It happened during the post-panel mingling session. People were gathering in small clusters, investors, founders, media teams buzzing about the ThriveNest launch. I was mid-conversation with a woman from a national education nonprofit when I heard the voice. Lindsay's voice. Louder than it needed to be. Shaky. High-pitched. "So this is what we're doing now?" she said, approaching the group. "We're just pretending none of this was stolen?" I turned slowly. She was standing there, eyes glassy, cheeks flushed, not from makeup, but from rage she couldn't contain anymore. "Lindsay," I said calmly, "this isn't the time or place." She laughed loud and unhinged. Oh, but it was the time and place when you paraded around my ex with my idea and called it your big comeback? People were watching now. Conversations paused. Phones slowly lifted. I see what you did, she spat. You weaponized your own failure and made me the villain just to get sympathy points. Well, guess what? None of this changes the truth. I should have walked away. But instead, I looked her in the eye and said softly, No, Lindsay, this is the truth. The only difference is that, this time, you don't get to edit it. Her face crumpled, and in a voice barely above a whisper, she said the words I think she'd been holding back for months. He was supposed to be mine. Everyone heard it. Marcus did too. He didn't flinch. He simply reached for my hand and said out loud, for everyone to hear, I was never yours, Lindsay. Not truly. You were a chapter. Valerie is the story. That broke her. She turned, tried to storm out, but caught the edge of a camera tripod. It toppled over with a crash. Gasps erupted. She muttered a curse and ran for the exit, heels clacking like punctuation marks on a tantrum. No one followed her. No one whispered in sympathy. They just returned to their conversations. She didn't just lose the room. She lost the illusion. And me? I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't gloat. I just exhaled. Because for once, the chaos didn't belong to me. It belonged to her. Fallouts don't happen all at once. They unravel thread by thread, post by post, whisper by whisper until the person who once dominated every room finds themselves sitting in silence, wondering where it all went wrong. That was Lindsay. Her meltdown at the conference made it to social media within hours. Someone in the crowd had recorded the entire scene, her shouting, the tripod crashing, Marcus's final line. It was clipped, edited, slowed down, and reshared like wildfire across TikTok and LinkedIn. One clip alone was captioned, When your sister becomes the main character and you can't handle it. The comments weren't kind. Not this time. People started connecting dots. They remembered the mic snatching incident. They dug up old tweets, tone-deaf captions, deleted influencer videos. Threads formed. Stories surfaced. Former brand collaborators, acquaintances, even past friends, started sharing screenshots and quiet observations they'd kept to themselves for years. She once pitched a product using a friend's trauma story without permission. Told me my startup wasn't aesthetic enough to deserve funding. I always felt something off. Now it makes sense. It wasn't just internet noise. It was a reckoning. Her followers dropped by the thousands. Sponsorships paused. A podcast episode featuring her was quietly taken down. One fitness brand she partnered with posted a vague Instagram story about reevaluating values and partnerships. She tried to spin it. She posted a Notes app apology that began with, I'm not perfect, but I've always led with heart, and ended with a quote from some poet she likely didn't read. It didn't work. Not this time. Because this time, she wasn't just messy. She was mean. Entitled. Transparent in all the wrong ways. And for the first time in her carefully curated, algorithm-fed life, people stopped clapping. Meanwhile, I kept quiet. I didn't need to say anything. The work spoke louder. Thrive Nest's beta waitlist doubled in a week. We were featured in a local business journal. Our first university partner announced a pilot program on their student portal. And I kept building. While Lindsay's empire of filters and borrowed brilliance crumbled, I was laying bricks. Real ones. But what struck me most wasn't how fast it all collapsed. It was how quiet it became. For someone who lived on attention, who measured her worth in comments, clicks, and collaboration, silence was louder than any public cancellation. She disappeared for a while, deleted her Twitter, switched her Instagram to private, posted vague story slides about needing to protect her energy and starting a healing journey. But healing doesn't begin until truth does. And Lindsay hadn't gotten there yet. My parents called once during this time. Just once. My mom asked if I could be the bigger person and maybe reach out. My dad mumbled something about families surviving storms. But I wasn't the storm. I had just stopped sheltering them from hers. And the truth is, sometimes storms don't pass. Sometimes they just move. Or collapse under their own weight. Lindsay's didn't pass. It simply consumed itself by ego, unchecked, until there was nothing left to destroy except the very stage she'd built. And me? I didn't watch with glee. I just kept going. Because revenge might have lit the fire. But purpose? That's what kept it burning. Some stories begin with sparks. Ours didn't. There was no grand confession. No dramatic first kiss under the rain. No sweeping soundtrack or perfectly timed sunrise. It started quietly, with a to-go coffee cup on my desk every morning. With texts like, "Don't forget to eat," and "You were amazing in that meeting." With late-night video calls that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with existing together. At first, I told myself we were just a team. Just two people bound by purpose and persistence. He was the investor, the strategist. I was the builder, the operator. Our bond was practical, professional. And yet, when I broke down before a product demo, Marcus didn't offer a speech. He sat beside me on the floor and said nothing, just held space until my breathing steadied. When my car battery died on a Monday morning, he showed up without me asking, coffee in one hand, jumper cables in the other. When I told him I couldn't handle another networking dinner, he canceled our RSVP and cooked pasta at his place instead. No expectations. No pretenses. Just presence. That was the thing about Marcus. He didn't try to fix me. He just didn't leave. And after everything I'd been through with Lindsay, with the startup world, with a lifetime of being told to stay small, his consistency felt radical. We never really said when it changed. There was just one night, sitting on his balcony, eating Thai food from paper boxes, when he looked at me and said, almost absent-mindedly, "You feel like home." I didn't respond right away. But inside, I knew. I felt it too. So we didn't make a big announcement. No relationship status updates, no soft launches, just a quiet folding into each other's lives. He started leaving t-shirts at my apartment. I stocked his favorite oat milk in my fridge. He met my coworkers. I met his mom. And the golden retriever? She approved of me early on, claimed her spot on my side of the bed within a week. We built slowly. A life that felt calm. A life that wasn't a performance. Sometimes we talked about the past briefly, carefully, but most days, we didn't need to. Because what we were building mattered more than what we'd survived. We focused on Thrive Nest, yes. But we also focused on thriving, period. We planned a weekend trip to Oregon just because we could. We planted herbs on his windowsill, even though neither of us remembered to water them. We read beside each other without needing to fill the silence. And in all of that, I found something I hadn't realized I was searching for. Not just love, but love that didn't demand performance. Love that didn't shrink me. Love that made room. One night, over takeout and a documentary we didn't finish, Marcus looked at me and said, "Do you ever think this whole thing started out as revenge?" I smiled. "Maybe," I said. "But that was just the spark." "What is it now?" he asked. I didn't have to think long. Now? It's real, and it's ours. End of V. He kissed my forehead. And in that quiet, ordinary moment, I realized, for the first time in my life, I wasn't rebuilding from ashes. I was building something brand new. It happened quietly. No camera. No stage. No audience to witness the ending. Just a text message on a Tuesday afternoon. "Can we talk? Just you and me. One time, please." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't respond right away. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because, for the first time in years, I wasn't rushing to fill the silence between us. I wasn't scrambling to fix something I didn't break. Eventually, I typed back. "Tomorrow. On Zoom. Café Luna." I chose the cafe on purpose. Neutral ground. Public but not crowded. The kind of place where voices stayed soft and truth had room to breathe. When I arrived, she was already there. Lindsay. No lashes. No camera-ready smile. Just her sitting at the corner table, fingers wrapped around a mug she hadn't sipped from. She looked up and gave a small nod when she saw me. For once, she didn't try to hug me. Didn't start with drama. Just waited. I sat down across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she exhaled and said, "I didn't come to argue." "Good," I said softly, "because I didn't come to save you." She winced. And then quietly, "I deserved that." I didn't reply. She looked down at her hands. No rings, no bracelets, just skin and shame. "I've lost a lot," she admitted. "Brands, friends, even Mom barely speaks to me now." I kept my face still, neutral. "And I know I caused it," she added. "I know I hurt you. I know I broke things I can't fix." I nodded. "You did." More silence. "I just—" Her voice cracked. "I guess I thought you'd always bounce back. You were always the strong one. Always the one who didn't need." I needed. My voice was clear. Steady. I just stopped asking. "How?" She blinked fast, holding back tears. "Why did you hate me so much?" I asked. Not bitter, just honest. "What did I ever do except exist in the shadow you demanded?" She shook her head. "It wasn't hate, it was fear. Of being irrelevant. Of not mattering. And then Marcus, the app, the applause. You got everything I thought was supposed to be mine. But it never was yours," I said gently. "You mistook attention for love, control for connection. You didn't want what I had. You just didn't want to watch me have it." Tears finally spilled. She didn't wipe them away. "I'm not here to punish you," I continued. "I'm here because I needed to say this with my own voice. Not through a pitch. Not through posts. Just human to human." She nodded, lips trembling. "I don't expect forgiveness. I'm not offering it." "Not yet," I replied. "But I'm offering a boundary. This right here's closure. I don't hate you. But I won't carry you anymore. Not your guilt, not your chaos." She cried harder now. But I didn't reach for her. Because sometimes love means walking away. Sometimes compassion means choosing peace over reunion. And sometimes, the healthiest thing two sisters can do is stop pretending there's something left to fix. I stood up. She didn't. As I left, she whispered behind me, "I hope someday you'll forgive me." I paused only for a second, then said without turning around, "I already forgave myself." End of. And I walked away lighter than I'd ever felt. Because that wasn't an ending. That was freedom. I used to think healing would feel like applause. Like finally getting recognized. Like everyone who doubted me lining up to say, "You were right, we were wrong." But healing doesn't sound like validation. It sounds like silence is sweet, undemanding silence. It sounds like breathing without bracing. It looks like waking up one morning, seeing a message from someone who once broke you, and realizing you don't owe them a reply. It feels like peace. Not because the past didn't happen, but because it no longer owns you. There's this myth we're taught, especially as women, that forgiveness means reopening the door. That growth is only real if we can smile at the people who once stepped on our hearts and say, "It's okay." But here's what I've learned. You can forgive and still walk away. You can be kind without becoming a doormat. You can be whole without being welcomed back. I didn't reclaim my life by getting even. I reclaimed it by choosing me. By setting boundaries, not out of revenge but out of self-respect. By loving someone Marcus not because he rescued me, but because he never asked me to shrink. By no longer needing to prove myself in rooms that were never built to hold me. And I'm not saying it was easy. I had to let go of people I once thought were permanent. I had to sit with grief that didn't come from death, but from the slow, aching truth that some people just won't change. I had to grieve the version of myself that kept trying to earn love through performance. But through all of that, I found something better than applause. I found my voice. And not the voice shaped to please or protect. The real one. The one that says, "I am enough. As I am." Without the stage, without the spotlight, without the approval I once begged for. Lindsay will tell her story the way she wants to. She always has. But mine, this one, it's mine now. And it's not about her anymore. It's about knowing that your worth isn't up for debate. It's about realizing that walking away isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's about recognizing the power of building something in silence and then watching it grow louder than any apology you never got. Somewhere along the way, I stopped needing to be seen. And that's exactly when I became visible to the right people in the right ways. I don't know what comes next, but I know who I am walking into it. And that is the greatest gift life has given me. Not success, not revenge, but a quiet, rooted kind of freedom. A freedom that doesn't need to be proven, just lived.